Hello, my name is Chester Dameron, and this is my faith testimony speech of how I came to have a relationship with Christ. My dad's father, my grandfather, was a Christian Missionary Alliance preacher for over 50 years. Him and my grandmother served in many of the southern states in churches, and along the way they had 9 children, my dad being one of them. My father, along with all of his siblings, ran from God at an early age, as soon as they were able to leave the house. Because of that, I didn't attend church as a child growing up. There are many excuses that I could use for the way my life turned out, but I choose to claim responsibility today for my actions and give credit to my father and grandfather for the way they tried to raise me. They gave me many good examples of how I should have lived my life. I was raised in a home where we didn't attend church, we didn't pray as a family, and we didn't read the Bible as a family. My mother was from Seattle, Washington, and her family is very liberal, so I guess that worked out in their relationship. I didn't want to look at myself as the reason for my failures. I was in denial for a long time. It wasn't until I entered recovery that I was able to give up, this anger and bitterness that I had, let go of the past, own my wrongs, and ultimately surrender to Christ for the help. My grandfather, like I said, was a preacher with the Christian Missionary Alliance for 50 years, and he did a lot of good as a preacher, teacher of the Word. But because of a pastor's salary, I've heard many stories about how my dad and his brothers and sisters would argue over half a potato. And my grandfather ruled with an iron fist. And when my dad was in 9th grade in high school, he dropped out and ran away from home. And that life, he moved to Daytona Beach, Florida, and began a job at a fast food restaurant called Crystal's. It's kind of like White Castle. And he did that up until the Vietnam draft. Excuse me. He was drafted to the Army in Vietnam, but my dad, being the stubborn man that he was, and still is somewhat, enlisted in the military, or in the Navy. And that's where he spent the next 30 years of his life, serving our country. My father, of course, married along the way to my mother, and I'm living proof. Because of the way he was raised, he didn't take us to church. There were a lot of times that he wasn't around because he would be deployed, and my mother was left to raise me on her own a lot. As long as I did what was asked of me around the house, I pretty much had free reign to do what I wanted. This is not a healthy way for any child to grow up, I can tell you that. My life turned upside down in the spring of 1988 when my sister Denise was shot and killed. My head and my heart began to fill with anger and rage for the first time I remember being mad at the world. I was mad at my dad also for not being there, and this fueled the next 16 years of my life and my addictions. Over the next 16 years, I started to experiment with drugs and alcohol, each one progressing to the next and higher level, which sent me on a downward spiral, all the while blaming my father and my grandfather for the way things were turning out for me in my life. On November 23rd of 2010, I moved from Florida to Texas to go through a 6-month Christian character building program. This was the life change that I needed. I'd been to secular recovery, intensive outpatient, Alcoholics Anonymous, halfway houses, all the while bumping my head on the bottom. I'm pretty sure that God had his hand on my life and on this situation because of the man my grandfather was. As I went through the program, the Lord allowed me to open and read the Bible and gave me understanding about what its contents provided. I was able to get rid of the anger and the bitterness in my life, and I was even able to make amends with my father. I couldn't make amends with my grandfather, he's since passed away. But I was able to make amends to my father for all the grief that I put him and my mother through. I began to hear the Lord talking to me, and I heard him talking to my heart, telling me that I'm worth it and that he has a purpose for my life. During the program, I completed a few of my first Bible studies. Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren, Experiencing God by Henry and Richard Blackaby, and the Master Life series, Disciples Cross. These helped incredibly with my being able to understand the Word and how God wants me to live my life. Sobriety soon became a byproduct of my newfound Christian way of life. Today I work for the program that gave me the opportunity to change my life for God, Oak Ridge Disciple House. Today I am able to give back what was freely given to me, and because of the work that I am involved with, the director, directed me to further my education in this field. That's why I'm pursuing a degree in psychology and counseling with Crown College. If somebody would have told me 4 years ago that this is how my life was going to be, I probably would have told them that they were crazy and that they didn't know what they were talking about. I wouldn't trade my life today for anything. God can take a broken person with no direction in their life and turn them into what He originally intended them to be. Someone with a heart for the lost, someone who daily strives for a relationship with Him, and a soul that's bound for eternity. My grandfather was a pastor who did his best to raise 9 children. My father ran from this Christian upbringing, raising me in a home that didn't put God first. I plunged into a world of darkness, driven by drugs and alcohol, and when I came to the end of myself, the only place to turn was to the Lord for help. If I had to live my life over again and go through all the heartache and hell that I put myself through, I'd do it all again, as long as it led me right back to the place I am in my life right now, walking this Christian life. Thank you.